Welcome, everybody. Hello, Secular Fam, and what a special Friday today is. Please be sure to put your name in the chat and be sure to switch the audience from host and panelist to everyone so that we can all see it. I'm going to get right down to business today because I'm so excited about our speaker. Now, for next week, we will be speaking with Scott Latta, author of Gods of the Smoke Machine, Power, Pain, and the Rise of Christian Nationalism in the Megachurch. I'm really excited about that too, and I think I might have to download that book later on today. So you definitely don't want to miss that discussion. But for today, I am chomping at the bit to dive right into our discussion. We are speaking with Katherine Stewart. Katherine Stewart has been covering religious nationalism and the assault on American democracy for over 15 years. Her latest book that I'm currently reading, Money, Lies, and God, is out now in hardcover, paperback, ebook, audiobook, you name it. And I cannot recommend it enough. She is also the author of The Power Worshippers Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism, which was awarded first place for excellence in nonfiction books by the Religious News Association, as well as a Morris D. Forkosch Award. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Her earlier book, The Good News Club, The Christian Right's Stealth Assault on America's Children, covered the religious right's efforts to infiltrate and undermine public education. And she was writing about that 15 years ago, folks. And here we are today. She writes for the New York Times, Opinion, New Republic, and many others, and has appeared on CNN, MSNBC, and NPR. In 2020, The Power Worshippers was acquired by producers Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner, who subsequently based their documentary feature film, God and Country, on that book. Be sure to purchase Stewart's latest book, Money, Lies, and God today, because you will not be disappointed. Katherine Stewart, I am so happy and grateful that you are here with us today. And I know that people don't want to hear me talk, so I am basically just going to hand it over to you. But was there anything in your bio that I missed?
No, that was really great. Thank you so much, Jean. And, I launched a Substack this week, just a few days ago. So it's kind of a new thing for me. I'll be putting, sort of putting a lot of the pieces that I write there. I'll be producing original content for it. And I'm very excited about that. So if anybody's interested in Substack, please follow me. And I'm really happy to be here today and very glad to speak with Secular Arizona. I want to thank all of you for being here. We are really facing a challenging time. I mean, everything that has made our country great, our leadership in scientific research, our uh, our sort of democratic institutions, the principles of equality and justice and the rule of law and pluralism, all of these are really under threat. Our institutions are under threat, our values, our religious freedom is under threat, our freedom of conscience, our freedom of speech, democracy itself. So I'm really going to speak for about 25 minutes, and then I just want to hear from you guys. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here and the challenges we're facing, and then we'll talk about what we can do about it. So I actually want to start off on a moment of hope amidst the chaos that we're seeing, the sort of destruction in real time. I'm actually seeing a broader awakening among some sectors of the population. I'm starting to see more important, like some important forms of coalition building. There are no guarantees, of course, that we can sort of turn the tide, but there's a lot that can be done by each of us as individuals, and there's even more that we can achieve when we join together with others. So for those of you who don't know my story, I'll sort of summarize it briefly. My journey into this world began 16 years ago when a Good News Club showed up at our daughter's public elementary school. What I saw then just didn't make any sense at all. Why was a fundamentalist Bible club forcing its way into our kids' public elementary school, targeting children as young as 6 and 7 years old, kids who are too young to read? And they were actually offered free and better space at the same time in the evangelical church literally next door to the school, and they declined. And that really confused me. I thought, why do they want to be in our public school when they could be in the church next door at the same time and don't have to pay a fee for it? What do the people who ran the club really mean when they called our public school their mission field, when they were calling other people's children the harvest? So as I followed this thread, I found the topic was much bigger than I imagined. Money, Lies, and God, my latest book, is my third on the anti-democratic movement, and each book has expanded in scope. My first book, The Good News Club, examined the religious right's efforts to infiltrate and undermine public education. My second book, The Power Worshippers, really focused on the anti-democratic movement's exploitation of religion for politics and power. And Money, Lies, and God examines the anti-democratic coalition more broadly. The thing that I've noticed over time is how much the Christian nationalist movement has evolved. 16 years ago, it was really clear to me that the leaders behind this Good News Club and similar initiatives were exploiting religion to pursue a political agenda profoundly at odds with American democracy. But this organization, I realized, was just one small component of a leadership-driven, organization-driven machine, a political machine. The movement's legal ecosphere, its sort of capture of the courts, and the way it litigates various cases to get big wins, it's one of the most vital features of this movement. It's tactical. It's extremely well funded. I mean, over the last decade or so, billions of dollars have gone into shaping the courts and funding the sort of promotion of certain cases. They're very long range in their thinking, and they're working toward a redefinition of the very idea of religious liberty that aims to turn civil rights law on its head. So shortly after I began my research, I could see this movement was waging war on the foundations of our democracy and its institutions. So I really want to talk about what we're facing, how we got here, and what to do now. At the time that I started writing about these issues, most Americans, at least on the mainstream spectrum from center right to center left, they thought this movement was a kind of shouty but marginal group. But in 2016, in 2024 again, Donald Trump won the presidential election with a crucial backing of the Christian nationalist movement, its leaders and its voters. And after the January 6, 2021 attack on our Capitol, and the subsequent overturning of Roe versus Wade, along with other theocracy-friendly Supreme Court decisions, some of which are before us now, no serious commentator can dismiss the movement's importance. In recent years, the movement broadened its base of donors. It substantially increased its power, and it made inroads among new populations. It's more overt, I would say, in ending its aim to end pluralistic democracy. Movement leaders, I think, used to feel they had to hide their belief that only Christians of a certain reactionary type, not all Christians, but only the right kind of Christian in their mind, should dominate the key features of government and society. They used to hide their belief that our laws should be based on their preferred interpretations of the Bible. Now they're really pretty open about it. The way I've been doing my research for the last 16 years is I go to a lot of right-wing conferences and strategy gatherings and meetings. And at these places, speakers sneer at Christians, by the way, who emphasize social justice teachings or the social gospel. They call them false prophets or heretics or even agents of Satan. So it's really interesting that they see the non-religious, of course, as one of their main enemies. But liberal Christians are following behind there, aren't too far behind. So for those of us who've been following the movement, look, I'm not surprised that they're doing what they're doing, but the pace of the destruction is surprising. So I think we should spend just a minute cataloging some of the things we've seen just in the last few months. We've seen an evisceration of the Department of Justice, the system of justice, attacks on the independence of the judiciary. We've seen executive orders instructing Department of Justice officials to target Trump's political opponents in government, one of whom had the temerity to say that the 2020 election was not, in fact, stolen, which it wasn't. We've seen a haphazard and grotesquely inefficient chainsaw attack on vital government services. We've seen an attack on U.S. national security. We've seen willful undermining of our most important alliances, really the alienation of our best friends, and along with support for some of our worst enemies, adversaries who've never wanted to see a strong America. We've seen spectacularly reckless communications in the Department of Defense. I think I might be on one of Hegseth's signal groups. And, meanwhile, Trump sort of defends Hegseth for doing this. We've seen attacks on individual rights, the disappearing of individuals into offshore gulags for suspected crimes or even no crimes at all, an assault on the world economy that's going to impoverish Americans, needless trade wars that are losing Trump a lot of his rural support, and utter abandonment of America's soft power. Power hates a vacuum. If America stops feeding the poor in certain countries, well, somebody else is going to step in and do it and develop those connections, those power connections as a consequence. And now, of course, we've seen the State Department instructing its employees to rat out their colleagues for displaying, quote unquote, anti-Christian bias, whatever that means, even though there's absolutely no evidence of anti-Christian bias, including, there's plenty of evidence to show that other minority groups, such as Jews, Muslims, and Sikhs, experience discrimination and violence in much, much greater numbers. I mean, the proportions are not even remotely comparable. So all of this is in line with the broader Christian nationalist agenda. Demolish the institutions of government, push through unconstitutional measures to make room for the growing influence of religious institutions, and eliminate types of civil service that do not conform to a certain kind of hardline theocratic agenda. So how do we make sense of this? These features follow from the nature of the anti-democratic movement that has been building in this country over the past several decades. The movement long preceded Donald Trump, but it really came to peak power with the 2024 election. And Trump has given this anti-democratic movement rocket fuel. So the first thing to notice about the governing practice of the present administration is that it depends fundamentally on a constant war on the truth. Now, some people point out that politicians and political leaders have always lied on their way to power, and sure, to some degree that's true, but what we're seeing now is on a completely different order of magnitude. Present government doesn't just tell you that up is down, it tells you this when the truth of the situation is staring at you and every other sentient creature in the face. And then, incredibly, it bases policy on the idea that up is down. So, for instance, this movement came to power in part by claiming the biggest problem that we face in our society is wokeness and DEI. It's really kind of sort of the old Jim Crow mentality for the present moment. And they're using that to launch attacks on free speech, higher education, science research, and civil rights legislation. They're just ripping it all up because somehow they're supposedly afraid that a woke bureaucracy is oppressing them. They manufacture propaganda, such as the idea that public schools are Marxist indoctrination factories that exist to change children's gender against their will. And they use this lie to justify the dismantling of public education. And what they want is really to funnel taxpayer money, yours and mine, to private and religious schools that are free to teach contempt for those who are different. They repeat the lie that Democrats want to abort babies until the moment they're born or even after they're born. Every gathering I've been to in recent years, they say, oh, Democrats want to abort babies after they're born. That's called infanticide, and nobody's doing it, and nobody wants to. It's illegal everywhere. And they use this lie to restrict access to medication that prevents pregnancy in the first place or ends it in its very earliest stages. I mean, RFK Jr. has recently called for a review of the safety issues related to abortion pills, which, can end pregnancy in their earliest days. I mean, if he's worried about adverse maternal outcomes, just wait till he hears about pregnancy. It's, it's not always a walk in the park. Second feature, and I say that, by the way, as someone who has experienced pregnancy loss because my pregnancies like other people's. I mean, I have two wonderful children, but had, several other miscarriages, and sometimes uh, they don't go the right way. And unfortunately, women now are dying in America because they can't obtain the miscarriage care that they need. And even as they're dying, red states are passing legislation to prevent the collection of data related to death and disability as a consequence of denied miscarriage care and denied reproductive care. Now, the second feature of the current administration, I would say, is the performative aspect of everything that it does. The chainsaw attack on government services is a case in point. They're posturing as tough guys with chainsaws. And by doing this, they're trying to convey sort of play acting that they're tackling waste, fraud, and abuse, even as they are lining their own pockets with taxpayer subsidies, privileged government contracts. I'm thinking about Elon Musk, who's denying food to the poorest children in the world, as Bill Gates pointed out, even as he's taking billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies and getting fancy new contracts with the government. The dumbest trade war in history, as those wokety wokesters at the Wall Street Journal called it, does not appear to be motivated by serious economic analysis or real policy program. It's really just there to give the dear leader an opportunity to declare that he alone is responsible for one of the greatest days in American history, a new Declaration of Independence. So he's just it's a dominance display, and it's hurting real people. The third feature, and it's hurting all of our country, it's hurting our economy and making us, frankly, not the envy of the world anymore, but the laughingstock. A third feature of the current administration has to do with epic levels of corruption. Now, in the past, have some American governments involved some degree of collusion between major economic players and the government through the hallowed means of lobbyists? Of course. But again, what we're seeing now is on a different order of magnitude. The president himself is directly trading on the power of the office to issue meme coins for personal profit and cash in on social media companies whose only value is tied to his office. He's accepting palaces in the sky from the Qatari government, which harbors extremists of all different kinds. I mean, this is really kind of a case of the snake eating its own tail. Trump is criticizing anti-Semitism on college campuses. The number one donor to college campuses is Qatar, number one foreign donor. The money is often undisclosed or hard to trace, but it's been reported to have shaped Middle East departments. You know that Doha lends support, of course, to Hamas leaders. And then Trump turns around and takes a $400 million jet from Qatar. It just, again, there has been plenty of, imperfect things in our government, but there has almost never been a president who can justify this sort of corruption and amorality and presidential overreach purely on the idea that he alone is the beneficiary, purely on sort of personal enrichment. So Elon Musk, too, has built a whole business doing a whole empire doing businesses with the government, and is capturing additional sweetheart deals and even more billions of dollars of taxpayer subsidies. We've never, again, had a situation where a president has allowed an unelected oligarch unfettered access to the government to maraud through it and slash and burn government agencies while, capturing sweetheart deals for himself. So what are we to make of the situation? How did this happen? Well, they're doing exactly what they said they would do. The leaders of the New Right, which is one part of the anti-democratic coalition, said that they would smash the so-called administrative state, or the institutions of a functioning democracy. They said they longed for a more monarchical form of government, a Red Caesar is what they called it. Now, the religious right, which is the other part of the anti-democratic coalition, the Christian nationalist movement, they told us they hated public schools. In 1979, Jerry Falwell made the agenda clear. He said, "I hope to see the day when there are no more public schools." Churches will have taken them over and Christians will be running them. So religious right leaders also endorsed biblical economics. It's an idea about supposedly biblical economy in which the workforce is disempowered and power and money accrues to those at the very top. They call this biblical. Leaders of both sides of the anti-democratic coalition have nothing but contempt for the principles of equality and pluralism and justice that represent the best of the American promise. I call the religious right and the new right, or the Christian nationalist movement and the new right, the power couple of the new American authoritarianism. Or to be less polite, we could perhaps use the F word here, fascism. So the second thing I really want to convey is a kind of cautionary note about how to think about the moment we're facing. I think we need to understand that this movement isn't rational or coherent. You can't look for consistency all the time. It's powered by very rich people who are working to undermine the sources of their own wealth and security. It's powered by middle-class people who are voting to destroy the middle class, right? It's powered by, at the ballot box, by relatively economically precarious people, people in the sort of middle to lower middle, less educated realm, who are entrenching their own impoverishment. It's powered by intellectual ideologues who are fantasizing about impossible new regimes and that can't really ever exist in the way that they think they can. And despite their internal divisions, these different groups are actually working together. They're swimming in the same headwaters, as it were, but there are a lot of fissures in this coalition. And those fissures can be exploited, and they should be. Now, to be fair, many of these groups do have short-term concerns and interest that they hope will gain from the destruction of American democracy. And some degree they will. Some of the rich people will get richer, and certainly some of the things will become more powerful. But for the most part, they're acting out rather than acting. In my book, I label this phenomenon reactionary nihilism. They're more described by what they want to destroy rather than what they want to create. So the key thing to do is distinguish between the leaders of this movement, what they think they're going to deliver and what they're actually going to get if they succeed. They think they're going to turn the clock back to an imaginary land of the 1950s or maybe the 1850s, which is something they actually talk about, when everyone in society supposedly knew their place. We know what that means. When everybody supposedly shared the same religion, which they never did. When the free market supposedly reigned independent of a supposedly woke government, which isn't how things were happening. And of course, there were supposedly no deviants, as they define deviants. But of course, no such world ever existed, and no such world will ever come into being. Instead, we will get what we're already seeing now, a grotesquely incompetent, inefficient, and kleptocratic autocracy, isolated in the world and run for the benefit of a small group of cronies and their enforcers. So critical to this war on the truth is an attack on science education, an attack on science and rational thinking. For many observers, this war on science is the most baffling aspect of the movement. What kind of government guts the scientific research apparatus that has grounded America's economic strength and made us the envy of the world? What kind of administration destroys the agencies that handle food safety and approves new medications? What kind of government will fire the people who handle nuclear codes and air traffic safety? I don't know. I'm a little nervous about flying in America now. I mean, even among the MAGA faithful, I think it's presumably understood that one of the things that made America great was scientific advancement. And truthfully, the subset of the wealthy who are bankrolling the authoritarian movement made their money largely due to scientific advancements of one kind or another. So, this attacks on scientific establishment are also really baffling because the research is carried out at hundreds of places, many of them in red states, or presumably of interest to the Republican Party. But, we have to wonder what's behind this. These brazen attacks are not a series of isolated incidents. They're part of a far-reaching, deliberate attack on the truth. Now, we have to remember that Donald Trump rose to power with the determined assistance of a movement, the religious right, which denies science, which bashes government, and which prioritizes loyalty over professional expertise. Leaders of the Christian right have long seen scientific truths grounded in rational inquiry as their enemy. Today in MAGA land, climate denial is mainstream. Among the federal government's list of hundreds of banned words, remember the free speech crew is now banning words like clean energy, climate science, environmental quality, and pollution. These phrases and words are actually banned in our government agencies and in studies. Some leaders of the Christian nationalist movement, like those allied with the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation, if you guys aren't familiar with it, look it up. They've denounced environmental science as a, quote, cult of the green dragon, meaning satanic. They cast environmentalism as an alternative and false theology. Religious nationalism has brought to American politics the conviction that our political differences are a battle between absolute good and absolute evil. So when you're engaged in a struggle between the party of life, as they call it, and the party of death, as they also call it, as they sometimes now frame our political divisions, you don't need to worry about crafting careful policy based on expert opinion and facts and analysis. Only a heroic leader, free from the scruples of political correctness, can save the righteous from the damned. Fealty to the cause is everything. Fealty to the facts means nothing. In fact, fealty to the facts is counter to what they want. So again, what's the deeper reason? Democracy, this is it. Democracy relies on specialized knowledge. It relies on rational discourse. It relies on expertise and rational accountability and an educated public to function. The current administration understands intuitively that this kind of reason is inimical to dictatorial power. So they've set about destroying centers of expertise, both inside and outside the government. A disinformed public is easier to control. Very simply, they understand that the truth is their enemy. Now, for years, movement leaders articulated a vision of America that is deeply un-American. It's the idea that America was not founded on any principles, but on a specific religion and cultural heritage. It's the idea that America is on the brink of an apocalypse owing to the rise of equality and what they call wokeness, and what they call the radical left, which is anyone remotely not on board with their agenda, including rhinos or Republicans in name only. We're all supposedly woke communists now. It's the idea that democracy won't be able to solve the problems and the rules don't apply anymore. And so they say what we need is a strong man, an authoritarian leader who puts himself above the law and will seize the reins of power and scrap the rule of law in favor of the iron fist. So it's the idea that democracy, in the sense of government as representative of the people, respecting individual rights in a pluralist society with ethics laws, it's a sense that this kind of government simply doesn't work. They want to smash it up and create an autocracy in its place. This is emphatically not the ideas of Thomas Jefferson or Frederick Douglass or Abraham Lincoln and so many others who helped create America as we know it. It's not the idea of those religious leaders who are actually on the vanguard of some of our great progressive social movements. This idea is as anti-American as it gets. America was the first major state founded on ideas, not on a tradition, not on a specific heritage, and not on a religion. It's the idea that all people are created equal, that we should be governed by laws that are based on the principles of rational thought and a commitment to the common good. Laws that are deliberated in public and apply equally to all, even our leaders. It's the idea that our leaders are not kings who can abuse their subjects and pillage the public treasury for their own, for themselves and their families. They're not despots or tyrants, but our leaders should be fairly elected, subject to term limits, and answerable to the people and to our laws. It's the idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, of course, these ideals have not been applied consistently over time or perfectly. That said, we have a long history of progressive social movements too. So it would be false to say that just because there is one important strand in US history, that there has been no other. There have always been movements that sought to deliver greater forms of justice and equality. There have been wealthy people who devoted their wealth to socially progressive causes and the common good. And yes, there have been religious leaders who legitimized and defended the institution of slavery, but there were also religious leaders and religious movements, as well as non-religious movements based on conscience and principle that opposed the institution of slavery, and they ultimately prevailed. Um, America has done a lot of wonderful things that we should be proud of. It nurtured a free press that sought to bring corruption to light and hold its perpetrators to account. We've seen civil rights movements, women's rights movements, LGBT rights movements, and others that have delivered freedom and a measure of rights for America, and have inspired other movements, similar movements around the world. We've developed agencies that do vital health and science research, keep our food safe, and returned tens of billions of dollars to defrauded American consumers. So our democratic ideals and the things that have made us great are worth fighting for. Um, to conclude, I want to talk about, what we can do, because there's so much that we can do. There are things we can do as individuals, and there are things we can do better when we join together with others. You know, um, I was at America Fest in December, and I saw Steve Bannon speak. And he was talking to 20,000 MAGA faithful. He said, when you lost in 2020, you didn't get into bed and suck your thumbs. You got out there and you decided to fight. Now, the things that we would never want to do that they did. We would never want to organize or inspire political violence. We would never want to lie and spread disinformation and conspiracies. But we would do well to take note of their determination, their organizational capacity, their strategic moves in terms of turning out the vote. They identified 19 swing districts and 10 swing states that they needed. I'm sorry, 7 swing states that they needed to swing the election. They focused on different populations in those areas. They went after low propensity voters. They went after the Amish. I mean, they didn't just sort of sit back and say, oh, we're just going to sit this one out. It's so bad we can't deal with it. They really got out there. And there was a reduced enthusiasm for voting on the Democratic side of the aisle. So, we don't need to get into the reasons for that. I think that we need to understand that we need to get better at spotting when the right is trying to divide us. Remember, there's, uh, no victory without unity. Divide and conquer is the oldest war strategy in the book, and they know that. So I think we need to adopt the attitude, to paraphrase a former president, that the person who agrees with you 80% of the time is your 80% friend, not your 20% enemy. It's like a big, noisy family. We're not all going to get everything we want. And frankly, we probably shouldn't, because we're a really big, really diverse country. But if we can agree on more than we disagree on, then we can work together. We need to get a little more clever at spotting when the right is trying to divide us. Dampening enthusiasm for voting is a massive tactic. In fact, in my previous book, I have a quote. I might have put in this book too. There's a fellow who was heading up one of the religious rights major data operations, and he said, we have 200 million voter files in our database. We know what makes a person get out to vote, and we know what makes them stay home. So cultivating apathy among their opponents is a deliberate strategy. This is a fellow who is responsible, by the way, for an operation where they're finding messaging and forcing it into people's social media feeds, figuring out exactly what kind of voter they are, what's going to make them turn out to vote one way, and what's going to make them stay home. So we really need to get better at understanding when we're being played. So again, there's no substitute for the power of the vote. It's not just, on you to vote, but anybody in your circles or sphere of influence. people need to know that, look, we've got elections in less than 2 years. So don't just vote in national elections, vote in the midterms, vote in your local school board, because if you sit it out and think someone else is going to handle that, guess who's going to take control? The Moms for Liberty. And we don't want that. And then finally, I want to say there are a lot of great pro-democracy institutions that deserve our support. And I've spoken long enough, so I'd really love to hear from you guys.
Well, what you just said, I'm going to get to the questions because there's a few questions, but what you said about how they succeed if they divide us, and we just witnessed that here in Arizona. There was an anti-trans bill that they've gotten cleverer and cleverer about, equating anything related to LGBTQ to pornography. So it's like, it's wrapped up in this gift wrap of like, we're protecting the children from pornography. But no, what you're really trying to do is erase entire LGBTQ populations, not even being able to discuss things on the internet that relate to them because of how they classify pornography. And then another one about encampments on public universities and K-12 schools. And with both of those bills that were just signed by Governor Hobbs, who is a Democratic governor, they were supported by Democrats. And so it makes it very difficult for her, as she's running again in 2026, to have this packaged as a protect the children bill when there are several Democrats who are also supporting it, for her to veto it. And I mean, it encapsulates exactly what you said about how they succeed.
Well, I
They
do
divide
want to say something about this. The head of the NC National College Athletics Association said that out of 520 student athletes, there are 10 who are trans identified. So whatever you might think about this issue, or I might think about this issue, is it really worth the billions of words and potentially millions of votes that it collected? And I think one has to, the right is using these very polarizing topics as a method of distraction. They're not look, we've got a lot of problems in our country. Gun violence is the #1 cause of death among children and adolescents. We've got a lot of families. I think, what percentage of kids live in poverty? It's some huge number. I think something like nearly half of American women are on Medicare or some kind of public subsidy for healthcare because they don't make enough to make it work. In a lot of families, you've got two parents, you've got 4 jobs, and they still can't afford a really decent life for their kids. We've got a lot of now women are dying as a consequence of denial of medical care. We've got healthcare deserts developing in a lot of red states because a lot of doctors, especially maternity care deserts. So we've got like some real problems facing our country. We've got, a lot of serious stuff happening internationally that we should be focused on in a way that's productive for our country and not destructive. But they'd rather us look at these side issues and infight about those issues rather than, and by the way, they also want to back people into taking sort of unpopular positions or more to the point, the like spread lies. They're like, are you against pornography in the public schools? What? I mean, it's so funny. The other day I was speaking to a school librarian. One of the Moms for Liberty types marches in and says, where's the pornography section? She's like, we don't have a pornography section, but let me show you this book that we have by Callista Gingrich. Do you know what I mean? It's a library. There's all kinds of books in there, but there's no pornography. But but so what they're doing is sort of like deploying these culture war issues and these very divisive issues to sort of incite the politics of outrage, to distract people from the real challenges facing our country. There was this wonderful essay in Politico by a Turkish journalist who was talking about how Americans can learn so much from pro-democracy movements that have operated in autocratic systems around the world. And she said, we really need messaging that, or she said, it's to have a really strong pro-democracy movement to fight a dictator or autocrat. She had a number of recommendations. It's worth looking up. But she said you need messaging that transcends the professional classes. And what I take is to me and is like sometimes, if they're trying to make you talk about this culture war issue, pivot to the real bread and butter issues that affect Americans. Say you want us to be talking about this because you don't want us to be talking about that. I mean, look at the fact what Trump is doing. He ran on promises to be like a working class president, and all he's giving is tax cuts to the rich. And meanwhile, these needless trade wars, again, the dumbest trade war in history, is as those folks at the Wall Street Journal call it, it's going to be disproportionately impacting average, ordinary Americans and the poor Americans. The cuts to Medicare, the cuts to Social Security, the fact that the cuts to public education, the dismantling of the Department of Education, which provides 90% of funding for education services for kids with any kind of sort of learning challenge. I mean, these are disproportionately affecting ordinary Americans, and they matter so much more than those 10 NCAA players that
Yeah.
most of us don't know and will never come across.
No. And I mean, again, there's entire organizations who have created policies for this. It's not an issue, but again, yeah, and I mean, we've seen in even the atheist, agnostic, humanist community how it's divided us, and it's just wild to me that
Well, they're
so.
just laughing and rubbing their hands when they see those fights. I mean, again, we need a big tent. We need to stop purity testing one another. And that's another thing that this Turkish journalist said. She said, there's always a lot of sort of purity testing on the left, and that's just not helpful. We're not going to agree on
Agreed.
everything, but if we can agree on more than we disagree on, then we can work together.